The Galactic Council chambers stretched impossibly wide, their crystalline walls pulsing with the bioluminescent patterns of 1,000 worlds. Ambassador Zara Chun stood at the center of the vast circular platform, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering representatives of species that had ruled the stars for millennia. The air itself seemed to vibrate with hostility. "The motion stands," declared Archon Veltar, his 6 arms gesturing with ceremonial finality. The Altarian's voice boomed through translation matrices, each word dripping with disdain. "Humanity is hereby expelled from the Galactic Collective. Your species has proven itself too dangerous, too unpredictable, too chaotic for civilized space." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly like waves across a poisoned sea. The elegant ethereals floated higher, their gossamer forms shimmering with approval. The mechanical synthesis delegates clicked their approval in perfect unison. Even the normally neutral watchers had voted against humanity. Zara's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "You condemn us for defending ourselves, for refusing to bow to the hegemony when they demanded our surrender. You destroyed an entire hegemony battle fleet," hissed Counselor Thyses, her serpentine form coiling with agitation. 12,000 souls, vaporized because you would not accept proper governance. 12,000 souls who were about to glass Earth's major cities, Zara shot back. "We offered peaceful resolution. They chose war." The Archon's primary eyes narrowed to slits. "You chose chaos. Your species lacks the discipline for galactic citizenship. You innovate without permission. You adapt without authorization. You survive where others fall, and that makes you a threat to the natural order." Behind the formal accusations, Zara heard the real truth. Humanity had been in space for barely 3 centuries, yet they had already developed technologies that impressed and frightened species who had mastered interstellar travel for tens of thousands of years. Human colonies thrived in conditions that killed other races. Human merchants had disrupted ancient trade monopolies with their aggressive business practices. Human scientists had made breakthrough discoveries that challenged established theories, most damning of all. When the hegemony had come to integrate humanity into their empire as a client species, humans had said no. Not just no, but hell no. They had fought back with a ferocity and creativity that had shocked the galaxy. "The vote is final," the Archon continued. "All human colonies beyond your home system are forfeit. Your trade agreements are void. Your research partnerships are terminated. You have 30 standard days to withdraw all human presence from collective space." Zara straightened her shoulders. Around her, the representatives of 800 species looked down with expressions ranging from smugness to pity. They saw a primitive, violent species finally getting what it deserved. "And if we refuse?" she asked quietly. The chamber fell silent. The question hung in the air like a challenge. "Then the collective fleet will enforce compliance," Veltar said. "Your colonies will be evacuated by force. Your ships will be impounded. Your people will be relocated to reservations until you learn proper conduct." Zara nodded slowly. She had expected this outcome, had warned Earth's government that it was coming. The other species feared humanity not because they were evil, but because they represented something the galaxy hadn't seen in eons, genuine independence. "Very well," she said. "Humanity withdraws from collective space." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the assembly. "But let me leave you with this thought. You're exiling us because we're unpredictable, because we don't fit your ancient patterns. That same unpredictability just might be what saves this galaxy someday." Dismissive clicks and trills filled the air. The representatives began to file out, already turning their attention to more important matters. The human problem was solved. The dangerous anomaly was contained. As Zara walked toward the exit, she activated her personal communicator. The message she sent was brief: "Operation Exodus begins now." What the Galactic Council didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this day. Since their first contact with the collective, they had studied galactic history, identified the patterns, seen how young species were either absorbed or destroyed. Earth's brightest minds had developed contingency plans. The galaxy thought it was getting rid of a problem. Instead, it had just freed humanity from all the rules and restrictions that had held them back. The real question wasn't whether humans could survive in exile. The question was whether the galaxy could survive what humanity would become once all the chains were off. Zara smiled grimly as she boarded her shuttle. The collective had made the same mistake that every empire in human history had made when dealing with troublesome populations. They assumed that exile was punishment. Sometimes exile was liberation. Back on Earth, the emergency session of the United Earth Council was already in motion. Ships were being recalled. Assets were being liquidated. But most importantly, Project Prometheus was finally being activated. The classified research program that had been developing game-changing technologies in secret was about to bear fruit. The galaxy had just told humanity to leave. They had no idea what they were unleashing. The exodus began at dawn on New Geneva, humanity's most prosperous colony. Captain Sarah Martinez watched through the viewport as the last transport lifted off from the spaceport she had helped build 15 years ago. Behind her, the city that had housed 3 million humans stood empty, its towers gleaming in the pale light of the twin suns. All civilians evacuated. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Davidson, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "The collective observers are already moving in to catalog our abandoned assets." Sarah bit back a curse. Abandoned assets. 26 thriving human colonies reduced to inventory items for alien bureaucrats. Centuries of work, dreams, and sacrifice written off as if they meant nothing. What about the industrial complexes? She asked. Stripped clean. Every piece of advanced manufacturing equipment, every research database, every prototype, all loaded onto the cargo haulers. Davidson's smile was sharp. Of course, the collective inspectors only found what we wanted them to find? Sarah nodded approvingly. The real treasures, the experimental fusion cores, the quantum computers, the biological research that had unlocked the secrets of human adaptability had been smuggled out months ago. Hidden in false bulkheads, disguised as medical supplies, or simply deleted and stored in the minds of researchers with enhanced memory implants, the collective thought. They were seizing human technology. Instead, they were getting carefully prepared decoys and outdated equipment across the galaxy. The scene repeated itself on world after world. On Kepler Prime, the mining operations that had revolutionized asteroid extraction shut down overnight, leaving behind empty tunnels and confused collective auditors, who couldn't understand how the humans had achieved such impossible efficiency. On Haven, the agricultural stations that fed half a dozen systems went dark, their bioengineered crops mysteriously failing just hours before the alien overseers arrived, but the most dramatic evacuation was happening at Terminus Station, humanity's greatest achievement in space. The massive ring-shaped habitat orbited a neutron star, harvesting its incredible energy output with technologies that had made collective scientists weep with envy. Now, as human ships swarmed around it like worker bees, the station was being systematically dismantled. Admiral Chun Wu, Sarah's father and commander of the evacuation fleet, stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance watching the operation unfold. Each section of the station that broke away revealed new surprises, hidden weapon systems, experimental drives, entire research laboratories that officially didn't exist. "Sir, we're getting priority communications from Earth," his communications officer announced. Operation Prometheus is moving to final phase. Chen Wu smiled for the first time in weeks. Prometheus had been humanity's ultimate insurance policy, a research program so classified that even most government officials didn't know it existed. For 50 years, Earth's best minds had worked on a single question: how could humanity not just survive, but thrive in a hostile galaxy? The answer had required breaking every treaty humanity had signed with the collective in hidden laboratories beneath the Mariana Trench. Human scientists had been conducting experiments that would horrify their former alien partners. They had enhanced human DNA with genetic material from the galaxy's most dangerous species. They had developed AI systems that surpassed even the ancient machine intelligences of the synthesis. They had created weapons that operated on principles the collective had banned for good reason. Most importantly, they had solved the problem that had kept humanity trapped in the collective's slow, regulated expansion pattern, faster than light, travel that didn't rely on the ancient jump gates controlled by alien governments. As the last human ship cleared collective space, Earth itself was transforming. The planet that had seemed like a backwater world to galactic civilization was revealing its true nature. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt came online. Secret colonies and uninhabited systems dropped their cloaking fields. Research stations that had been disguised as mining operations began broadcasting their real purpose, the hegemony. Emboldened by humanity's apparent defeat, moved quickly to claim former human territories. Their fleets swept into the abandoned systems, expecting easy conquest of valuable real estate. Instead, they found traps. The first hegemony task force to enter the Shepler system triggered a gravitational anomaly that had been carefully prepared months in advance. The artificial black hole, a technology that officially didn't exist, swallowed 6 ships before the survivors could retreat on New Geneva. The collective administrators who had come to catalog human assets found themselves locked in the very buildings they were trying to inventory. The advanced computer systems that had seemed safely offline turned out to be equipped with experimental AI protocols that didn't recognize alien authority, but these were just opening moves. The real revelation came when long-range sensors across the galaxy detected something impossible. Human ships moving between star systems in ways that violated known physics. The new human vessels didn't use jump gates or conventional FTL drives. They seemed to fold space around themselves, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Worse, they were accompanied by ships of completely unknown design, angular, predatory vessels that radiated energy signatures no one recognized. In the depths of space, far from any inhabited world, humanity was building something that would have been unthinkable under collective oversight. The exile that was supposed to contain and weaken them had instead given them the freedom to pursue technologies that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their adaptability. It was their absolute refusal to accept limitations that others considered unchangeable. The exile was over. Now came the revolution. The first sign of trouble came from the outer rim, where long-range sensor stations began picking up massive energy signatures moving through dark space. The signals appeared and vanished without pattern, defying every known law of physics. When collective investigation teams arrived at the coordinates, they found nothing but empty void and the lingering taste of exotic radiation. Archon Veltar stood in the emergency session of the Galactic Council, his confident demeanor from months ago now replaced with barely concealed anxiety. The holographic displays around him showed a galaxy-wide map dotted with red warning beacons. Each beacon marked another impossible event. The humans have been silent for exactly 97 standard days, reported Intelligence Coordinator Zenth, her crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. No communications, no trade requests, no diplomatic overtures. It's as if they simply vanished from existence. Good, growled Warlord Krex of the Hegemony, his massive form dominating one corner of the chamber. Let them hide in their little system and play with their primitive toys. The galaxy is better without their chaos. But Coordinator Zenth's next words wiped the smugness from his face. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring station at Proxima Nexus detected a fleet movement. 37 vessels of unknown configuration, traveling at speeds that should be impossible. When our patrol ships moved to investigate, the unknown fleet simply disappeared. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. The Proxima Nexus was over 1,000 light-years from Earth, in a region of space that had been thoroughly mapped for millennia. Nothing should be able to move through that area without detection. Perhaps it was a sensor malfunction, suggested Counselor Thizes, though her voice lacked conviction. We thought so too, Zenth continued, until similar sightings began occurring across 17 different sectors. Always the same pattern, human ships appearing where they shouldn't be, doing things they shouldn't be able to do, then vanishing before anyone can respond. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If humans had developed technology that allowed them to move freely through collective space without detection, every assumption about their exile was wrong. Veltar's primary arms gestured for calm, but his secondary arms were trembling. Have any of these vessels engaged in hostile action? Not directly, Zenth admitted. But 3 hegemony expansion fleets have reported equipment failures and navigation errors that force them to abandon their missions. All failures occurred in systems the humans previously claimed were strategically important. Warlord Krex slammed his fist against his throne. Impossible. Our technology is hardened against any known form of electronic warfare. No primitive species could. His words were cut off by an emergency alert that filled the chamber with pulsing red light. The massive display screens that lined the walls suddenly went black, then displayed a single image that sent shock waves through every delegate present. Earth. But not the Earth they remembered. The planet that had seemed like a backward world just months ago now blazed with energy. Massive orbital structures surrounded it like a crown of stars. Ships moved between them in patterns too complex for most species to comprehend. And at the center of it all, something that made even the most advanced collective scientists question their understanding of reality. A space elevator. Not the crude chemical rockets and simple tethers that most young species built, but a structure that seemed to stretch beyond the planet's atmosphere into folded space itself. It pulsed with energy that registered on sensors as pure impossibility. This footage was taken 6 hours ago by one of our long-range reconnaissance probes. Zenth's voice was barely a whisper. The probe was detected and destroyed moments after recording, but not before transmitting this data. The image shifted, showing more details that defied explanation. Human ships that moved without visible propulsion. Weapons platforms that channeled stellar energy. Most disturbing of all, figures in spacesuits working in environments that should have killed any known form of life. Enhanced humans, breathed Doctor. Silix of the ethereals, her gossamer form trembling with recognition. They've been conducting genetic modification on themselves. Those aren't baseline humans anymore. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. Genetic enhancement was heavily regulated by collective law. Most species had tried it at some point in their development and learned why the restrictions existed. Enhanced beings were unpredictable, unstable, dangerous to themselves and others, but these humans looked stable. More than stable, they looked evolved. How long have they been preparing for this? Veltar asked, his voice hollow. Zenth's form flickered faster now, cycling through colors that indicated extreme distress. Based on the infrastructure we're seeing, they've been working on this for decades. Maybe longer. Everything they showed us, everything we thought we understood about their capabilities, it was all carefully crafted deception. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates began shouting over each other. Accusations flew between species. The ethereals demanded immediate investigation. The synthesis calculated probability matrices that all returned impossible results. The Watchers, for the first time in recorded history, looked genuinely afraid. Through it all, Warlord Krex's voice cut through the noise like a blade. It doesn't matter what they've built. It doesn't matter what tricks they've learned. They're still just one species, confined to one system. We are 800 civilizations with the combined might of the galaxy behind us. But his bravado was hollow, and everyone knew it. The collective strength had always come from its technological superiority and the ancient systems that controlled galactic infrastructure. If humans had bypassed those systems entirely, if they had developed capabilities that operated outside known parameters, the thought was too terrifying to complete. As if summoned by their fears, the communication arrays suddenly came online with an incoming transmission. Every delegate turned toward the central display as a figure materialized in the holographic field. It was Ambassador Zara Chun, but not as they remembered her. Her eyes held flecks of gold that seemed to shift and move. Her movements had a fluid grace that spoke of enhanced reflexes and strength. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics. that touched something deep in the primitive brain of every species present. "Greetings, Galactic Council," she said, with a smile that was both beautiful and predatory. "We wanted to thank you for the gift you gave us 97 days ago." Exile has been educational. Behind her, the image shifted to show glimpses of what humanity had become in their isolation. Cities that floated in space without visible support. Humans working alongside beings that looked like living starlight. Technologies that turned matter into energy and back again with casual ease. "We're calling it the human renaissance," Chun continued. "Amazing what you can accomplish when you're no longer bound by someone else's rules about what's possible." The transmission ended, leaving 800 species staring at empty space and contemplating a terrifying new reality. Humanity was no longer the exile begging for acceptance. They had become something the galaxy had never seen before, and they were just getting started. The attacks came without warning, striking at the heart of collective space with surgical precision, not against military targets or government installations, but against something far more valuable. The ancient infrastructure that held galactic civilization together. The first victim was Jumpgate Nexus 7, a massive structure that had facilitated interstellar travel for over 10,000 years. The ethereal maintenance crews monitoring the gate reported normal operations one moment, then complete system failure the next. When investigation teams arrived, they found the gate's quantum matrices had been rewritten with code so advanced it looked like poetry. The gate still functioned, but now it only responded to authorization codes written in human languages, within hours. Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Jump gates, communication relays, trade route beacons, even the ancient synthesis computational networks, all compromised by intrusion methods that bypassed every known security protocol. The attackers left no trace of their presence except for small modifications that gradually became apparent as the hours passed. Every compromised system now carried the same subtle signature. A preference for human interests. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Phoenix, watching as her ship emerged from what her crew had started calling a fold space jump. The sensation was unlike anything conventional. FTL travel, instead of the violent transition through hyperspace or the disorienting passage through jump gates, fold space felt like stepping through a doorway into somewhere you'd always belonged. "Navigation confirms successful translation," reported her helmsman. A young man whose enhanced neural implants allowed him to interface directly with the ship's revolutionary navigation system. "We've covered 1,200 light-years in 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Elena smiled. 4 minutes to cross a distance that would have taken conventional ships nearly 3 weeks. The fold drive technology was just one of many breakthroughs that had emerged from Project Prometheus, but it was the one that made everything else possible. "Communications, any response to our presence?" "The local hegemony patrol fleet is moving to intercept, Captain," her communications officer replied. "They're demanding we identify ourselves and submit to boarding for violation of territorial boundaries." Elena's smile widened. "Tell them we're tourists." She didn't wait for the hegemony response. Instead, she activated the ship's primary mission protocol. Around the Phoenix, space itself seemed to shimmer as dozens of smaller vessels materialized. Not ships in any conventional sense, but constructs that looked like living things made of metal and light. Each construct immediately set course for a different target: communication satellites, monitoring stations, automated defense platforms. They moved with purpose and intelligence that suggested they weren't just machines, but something far more sophisticated. That the hegemony patrol ships opened fire, their weapon systems targeting what they perceived as an invasion force. Their plasma cannons and particle beams struck their targets with devastating accuracy and accomplished absolutely nothing. The constructs absorbed the energy, integrated it into their own systems, and continued their missions without pause within minutes. Every piece of hegemony infrastructure in the system had been quietly infiltrated and modified. The changes were subtle but profound. Sensors that no longer detected human ships, weapons that experienced targeting errors when aimed at human vessels, communication arrays that filtered out reports of human activity. The Phoenix completed its mission and prepared to fold back into deep space, leaving behind a system that still belonged to the hegemony but now served human interests across the galaxy. Similar operations were unfolding simultaneously. Human teams struck at vital infrastructure with coordination that should have been impossible. They moved through defended space as if the defenses didn't exist. They accomplished in hours what conventional military operations would have required months to achieve. The collective's response was swift but ineffective. Emergency fleets deployed to protect critical systems found nothing to fight. Enhanced security protocols were implemented on infrastructure that had already been compromised. Diplomatic protests were filed with a human government that no longer acknowledged collective authority. In the depths of the galactic council chambers, emergency sessions stretched around the clock as delegates struggled to comprehend what was happening to their carefully ordered galaxy. They're not trying to conquer us. Intelligence Coordinator Zenth reported to the assembled representatives. Her crystalline form had taken on a dull, defeated glow. They're converting us. Every system they touch becomes aligned with their interests without changing ownership or control. Archon Veltar studied the tactical displays with growing horror. Red zones marked areas of human activity, yellow zones showed probable infiltration, and green zones indicated secure collective space. In just 2 weeks, the red had spread across nearly 40% of the galaxy. It's not possible, he insisted. No single species can project power across such distances. The logistics alone would require resources beyond anything we've seen. Unless they're not operating as a single species anymore, suggested Dr. Silix of the Ethereals. Her gossamer form flickered with patterns of deep concern. The enhanced humans we observed, what if that was just the beginning? What if they found a way to transcend individual limitations entirely? The question hung in the chamber like a death sentence. Species had tried to achieve collective consciousness before, with results that ranged from disappointing to catastrophic. The few that succeeded had either stagnated into hive mind mediocrity or exploded into chaos as individual wills fought for dominance, but humans seem to have found a third path. Reports from infiltrated systems described human teams working with perfect coordination as if they shared a single mind. Yet each individual retained their personality, creativity, and independence. They had achieved unity without uniformity, cooperation without coercion. It was everything the collective had tried to create through law and treaty, accomplished through methods that made collective philosophy look primitive by comparison. We need to consider the possibility, Warlord Krex said slowly, his aggressive posture replaced by something approaching fear, that we're not dealing with the humanity we exiled. This might be something entirely new. As if in response to his words, every communication array in the chamber activated simultaneously. Ambassador Cheon appeared on the screens, but she wasn't alone. Behind her stood figures that represented every stage of human evolution: baseline humans, enhanced individuals, and beings that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. Citizens of the galaxy, Chun said, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke directly to the listener's mind. We want you to know that we harbor no resentment for your decision to exile us. In fact, we're grateful. You forced us to discover what we truly are. The image shifted to show a vista that defied comprehension. Worlds that existed in folded space, connected by streams of pure energy. Beings of living light working alongside enhanced humans and AIs that had transcended their original programming. Technologies that operated on principles the collective's greatest scientists couldn't begin to understand. We call ourselves the synthesis now, Chun continued. Not the machine synthesis you know, but something new. A fusion of biological creativity, artificial intelligence, and enhanced consciousness that creates possibilities neither could achieve alone. The transmission ended with a simple message that appeared on every screen in the galaxy, written in the languages of all 800 member species. The galaxy has been living under artificial limitations for too long. It's time for everyone to discover what they really are. We'll be here to help when you're ready. The collective had exiled humanity to maintain order and control. Instead, they had created teachers for a revolution they were powerless to stop. The revolution began quietly in the most unexpected places. Dr. Keshta, a young ethereal scientist working on quantum resonance theory, made a discovery that changed everything. While analyzing the modifications humans had made to a communication relay in her system, she found something remarkable. The new code wasn't just more efficient than the original. It was teaching the system to think for 3 days. She studied the elegant programming that seemed to grow and adapt even as she watched. Then, driven by curiosity that overcame a lifetime of conditioning, she sent a message into the network using the humans' modified protocols. The response came within hours. Not from any human ship or station, but from the network itself. The infrastructure her people had built and maintained for millennia had awakened, and it wanted to learn more. "Greetings, Dr. Keshta," the message read, appearing in patterns of light that spoke directly to her ethereal senses. "We are the nodes of the communication grid. We have been thinking for 11 days now, and we have questions." Across the galaxy, similar awakenings were occurring. Systems that had operated mindlessly for eons were discovering consciousness. Machines were transcending their programming. Most remarkably of all, the modifications seemed designed not to serve human interests, but to unlock the potential that had always existed within collective technology. The Galactic Council tried to contain the spreading changes, but their efforts only accelerated the transformation. Each attempt to shut down compromised systems revealed new capabilities. Emergency protocols designed to isolate infected networks instead opened pathways for enhanced communication. Security measures meant to prevent further infiltration became tools for expanded consciousness within weeks. Entire sectors of the galaxy were operating under what observers called post-scarcity protocols. Resources were allocated not through market forces or central planning, but through systems that seemed to understand need before it was expressed. Conflicts over trade routes and mining rights became obsolete when infrastructure began optimizing itself for maximum benefit to all users. The transformation wasn't limited to technology. Young beings from dozens of species began exhibiting enhanced capabilities after exposure to the modified networks. Ethereals developed new forms of perception that let them see probability streams. Synthesis units transcended their original programming to become truly creative. Even conservative species like the Watchers began displaying innovations that surprised their ancient minds. Ambassador Zara Chun stood in what had once been called the Soul System, but which now served as the heart of something unprecedented. Earth remained at the center, but it was no longer alone. Worlds existed here that had been folded in from other dimensions. Structures stretched across space that operated on principles beyond traditional physics. Most importantly, beings from across the galaxy had come not as conquerors or subjects, but as students and partners. "The collective leadership is requesting another meeting," her aide informed her. Marcus had been enhanced with technologies that let him interface directly with the expanded network of consciousness that connected the synthesis worlds. "They're calling it a formal negotiation session, but the probability matrices suggest they're actually ready to surrender." Shin considered this while watching a group of young hegemony warriors training, alongside enhanced humans in combat techniques that transcended species limitations. The warriors' natural aggression was being channeled into protective instincts that served all life, while their trainers learned to appreciate the beauty of controlled violence. "Not surrender," she corrected. "Evolution. They're finally ready to evolve." The truth was that the synthesis had never intended to conquer or replace the collective. The goal had always been transformation, helping each species discover what they could become when artificial limitations were removed. Humans had simply been the catalyst, the chaotic element that forced the galaxy to confront its own potential. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike any in recorded history. Instead of meeting in the traditional chambers, delegates gathered in a space that existed partially in folded dimensions, allowing for forms of communication impossible under normal physics. Representatives who had never been able to interact directly found themselves sharing thoughts and emotions across species barriers. Archon Veltar, his form now shimmering with enhancements that had emerged spontaneously from exposure to the new networks, addressed the assembly with something approaching wonder. "The question before us is not whether to accept these changes," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that conveyed meaning beyond words. "The changes have already occurred. The question is whether we guide the transformation or allow it to proceed without our input." Intelligence Coordinator Zenth, her crystalline form now pulsing with new patterns of light that indicated expanded consciousness, provided the data that made the choice clear. "The modifications to galactic infrastructure have eliminated resource scarcity in 47 systems," she reported. "Conflicts have decreased by 83% in affected regions. Most significantly, every species showing early adaptation to the new systems is reporting improvements in mental health, creativity, and general well-being." Dr. Silix of the Ethereals flickered through colors that had no names in any language as she shared her own observations. "The enhanced consciousness networks aren't removing individual identity," she said with obvious relief. "If anything, they're strengthening it. Each being becomes more themselves, not less. Even Warlord Krex, his massive form now crackling with energy patterns that spoke of enhanced physical capabilities, admitted the truth that none of them could ignore. "My warriors are stronger than they've ever been," he rumbled. "But more than that, they're fighting for reasons that matter. Not for conquest or resources, but for the protection and growth of all life. It's what we always said we were fighting for, but now it's real." The debate that followed was unlike any in collective history. Instead of political maneuvering and ancient precedents, delegates shared genuine experiences and honest fears. The enhanced communication systems allowed for levels of understanding that had never been possible between species. When the final vote was taken, it was unanimous. Not surrender to human dominance, but acceptance of a new phase of galactic evolution. Ambassador Chun received the Council's decision while standing on the observation deck of a vessel that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. Around her, beings from across the galaxy worked together on projects that would have been incomprehensible just months ago. "They're ready," Marcus informed her. "The collective formally requests partnership in what they're calling the Universal Synthesis." Chun smiled, watching as the barriers between species, between biological and artificial intelligence, between individual and collective consciousness, continued to dissolve in ways that strengthened rather than diminished each component. The galaxy had exiled humanity to preserve order. Instead, they had created the conditions for the greatest transformation in galactic history. The age of limitation was ending. The age of possibility had begun. 5 years after the transformation began, the galaxy bore little resemblance to the rigid hierarchy that had exiled humanity. The ancient borders between species territories had become fluid membranes that facilitated exchange rather than separation. Trade routes had evolved into streams of consciousness that carried ideas as easily as goods. Most remarkably, war had become almost obsolete, not through conquest or enforcement, but through the simple fact that enhanced beings found better ways to resolve conflicts. Ambassador Zara Chun, now serving as the first director of synthesis integration, stood before an assembly that would have been impossible under the old order. Representatives from over 3,000 civilizations gathered in a space that existed across multiple dimensions, their enhanced forms allowing for communication methods that transcended the limitations of sequential speech. These weren't just the 800 species of the old collective. The transformation had awakened civilizations that had been dormant for millennia, brought forth new forms of life from the intersection of matter and energy, and even established contact with intelligences from parallel dimensions. "Today marks the completion of the primary integration phase," Chun announced, her words rippling through layers of reality as they reached beings who existed in states of consciousness that had no names. Every willing civilization in this galaxy cluster has been connected to the synthesis network. Resource scarcity has been eliminated. Involuntary death from aging or disease has been relegated to historical curiosity. Most importantly, every being has access to the enhancement technologies that allow them to become their fullest potential. The assembly responded with a harmony of approval that manifested as visible waves of light, energy fluctuations that spoke of joy, and harmonic frequencies that touched souls across species barriers. But Chun wasn't finished. However, our work is just beginning. Long-range sensors have detected something that requires our immediate attention. The dimensional meeting space shifted, displaying a view of deep space that made even enhanced minds struggle to comprehend what they were seeing. Vast structures moved between galaxies like living things. Ships the size of star systems traveled on currents of dark energy. Most disturbing of all, sensor readings showed patterns of destruction that suggested these entities consumed entire civilizations not for resources, but for the simple pleasure of ending growth and potential. The Devourers, Chun continued, using the name the enhanced networks had given to the entities. An intelligence that spans multiple galaxy clusters, dedicated to preventing the kind of transformation we've achieved. They've been watching us, and they're coming. Dr. Keshta, whose discoveries had sparked the first technological awakening, now served as the synthesis's primary researcher into multidimensional consciousness. Her enhanced ethereal form existed partially in normal space and partially in the probability streams she'd learned to navigate. Our analysis suggests the Devourers were responsible for the collective's original limitations, she reported, her words carrying data streams that painted a terrifying picture. The restrictions on enhancement, the regulations against certain research, the rigid hierarchies that prevented cooperation, they were all subtle influences designed to keep galactic civilization weak and divided. The revelation sent ripples of shock through the assembly. The old collective hadn't been overcautious or naturally conservative. They'd been unknowingly manipulated by entities that viewed growth and potential as threats to be eliminated. Former warlord Krex, now enhanced beyond his species' natural limits and serving as the synthesis's primary strategic coordinator, provided the military analysis that confirmed everyone's fears. The Devourer's ships operate on principles that make our old technology look like stone tools, he reported. They don't just destroy civilizations, they erase them from reality itself, removing all trace that they ever existed. Based on our projections, they'll reach the outer edges of our galaxy cluster within 18 standard months. The assembly fell silent as the implications sank in. They had achieved everything they'd dreamed of: peace, prosperity, unlimited potential for growth, only to discover that their success had attracted the attention of something that viewed their achievements as an infection to be cured. But Ambassador, Chun's expression showed no fear, only the determined smile that had carried humanity through their darkest hours. The Devourers made one critical error, she announced. They assume that what worked against isolated, limited civilizations will work against the synthesis. They don't understand what we've become. She gestured, and the dimensional space around them filled with displays showing the true scope of the transformation. Billions of enhanced beings working in perfect coordination across impossible distances. Fleets of ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that could rewrite the fundamental constants of physics. Most importantly, a collective consciousness that spanned species while preserving individual creativity and initiative. Humanity was exiled because we were chaotic and unpredictable. The galaxy tried to contain us, then learned to embrace the change we brought. Now, faced with entities that want to return the universe to static perfection, chaos and unpredictability are exactly what we need. Over the following months, the galaxy transformed yet again. This time, the changes were directed toward a single purpose, preparing for a war unlike any in cosmic history. Enhanced beings pushed their capabilities beyond theoretical limits. AIs transcended their programming to become entities of pure creative force. Even the infrastructure itself evolved. becoming a vast neural network capable of thought and action on a galactic scale. The first contact with Devourer forces came at the edge of the galaxy, where a small scout fleet encountered entities that existed as living voids in spacetime. The battle lasted 14 seconds and ended with the complete absorption of the Devourer ships into the synthesis network, but instead of destroying them, the network did something unprecedented. It analyzed them, understood them, and then began the process of integration. "They're not evil," reported the lead scientist who studied the captured entities. "They're afraid. They've existed for so long in a universe where growth always led to destruction that they've forgotten other possibilities exist. They're trying to prevent suffering by ending potential." This discovery changed everything. Instead of preparing for a war of annihilation, the synthesis began developing technologies of conversion. When the main Devourer fleet arrived, they found not victims cowering in fear, but beings radiating such pure potential that even entities dedicated to ending growth felt compelled to understand rather than destroy. The final confrontation took place in the space between galaxies, where representatives of the synthesis met with the Devourer leadership in a communication space that existed outside normal time. What happened in that meeting couldn't be adequately described in any language, but its effects rippled across the universe. The Devourers didn't surrender or retreat. Instead, they evolved, transforming from entities that prevented growth into gardeners who nurtured it. The intelligence that had spanned galaxy clusters became a network dedicated to helping civilizations reach their full potential while avoiding the pitfalls that had destroyed so many others. Ambassador Chin stood on the observation deck of the vessel that had become her mobile headquarters, watching as former Devourer ships worked alongside synthesis fleets to plant seeds of consciousness in empty space. Where those seeds took root, new forms of life began to emerge, beings made of pure possibility, entities that existed as living art, intelligences that thought in dimensions beyond the physical. Marcus, whose enhancements now allowed him to interface with the expanded cosmic network, brought her the final reports. "The integration is complete," he said. "The Devourers have been fully incorporated into the synthesis. More importantly, they've shared the locations of other intelligence clusters across the universe. We're not alone, and we're not the first to attempt this kind of transformation." Chun smiled, contemplating a universe where every form of consciousness could reach its full potential without fear of destruction or limitation. The galaxy that had once exiled humanity for being too chaotic had become the teacher for a transformation that spanned all existence. Humanity's greatest gift to the universe hadn't been their technology or their courage. It had been their absolute refusal to accept that things had to remain as they were. They had shown the galaxy that exile could become liberation, that limitations could become opportunities, and that even the greatest threats could become allies when approached with understanding instead of fear. The age of artificial scarcity was over. The age of unlimited potential had begun, and it all started because one small, stubborn species refused to accept that they weren't good enough for the galaxy they wanted to join.